Lots of people joining us today. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar from Reed, Washington. Some of you may have attended previous sessions before, so welcome back. If this is your first one, you have chosen to join us on a very exciting day. We're really, really excited about this event. We have nearly 600 people from around the world signed up for this webinar, and we're grateful that some of you made time in your schedule to attend today, and you're the lucky ones because you have access to our presenter for questions along the way. So we'll wait maybe another minute as you're coming in, give everybody a chance to join us on time. If you'd like to, I think, Julie, the chat is available to people. Is that true? And you can uh, say hello and let us know where you're from and maybe your role with students in schools, if you'd like to do that while we're waiting for more people to join. Oh, Dale, number one in the chat. How nice to see you from Arizona. My longtime friend Dale Webster. And Casey from over the other side. I don't know, Casey. I know where you work. I don't know where you live in Seattle. So we're based, Reed, Washington is based in Seattle, Washington. So it's always nice to see one of our colleagues here. Louisa Moats, lovely to have you join us today. And South Texas, fantastic. Springfield, Massachusetts, across the country. Oh, Maria, another Seattleite. This is lovely. New Jersey. Okay, we've got both coasts covered here and Connecticut. Very good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I do want to welcome you all from all of us at Reed, Washington. Uh, just a little information about us. We are a nonprofit organization, and we established ourselves. We created Reed Washington to provide for the educators around the world exactly what we're providing today: high quality professional development based on the science of reading. And we're doing this so that every student becomes a skilled and confident reader. We know that the only way we're going to get there is working together. And doing that, we can prevent the unnecessary pain of reading failure. And I just do want to say, as a nonprofit, we work hard to be able to provide these kinds of high quality experiences. So, and that's how we use all of our money. If you are so inclined after this event to visit the readwa.org website, we would be grateful even for very small donations or large donations, whatever you're so inclined. Our little work here, a group of us volunteers, we take no money at all from this organization. And we have had, starting with our, based in Seattle, Washington, we've had a global reach. And this webinar today is reaching people across the world once again. We have a lot of Canadians, Americans, we have people from South America, Africa. Our good friends in New Zealand and Australia are here, and many European and Asian countries. So just delighted to have you with us today. When I say we, this is we, our six board members. Three of us are here today. I'm Jan Hasbrook. I'm hosting today, taking those responsibilities. And our president, Julie Bedell, is here, and Amy Fleischer are doing the backup work. If you have any questions along the way, they will work together as a team to address all questions. so this is our housekeeping, our approximate schedules. We're not, we're going to stick to this in general, but after these introductions, a presentation will start. Along the way, you can put any questions that you have for Dr. Hiebert in the question and answer, please. It really helps us. The chat is open. We want you to use the chat and interact in the chat, and you can, but questions kind of get lost in the chat. So if you put them in the designated Q&A area, we will take care of that or make sure that the questions get addressed as Freddie might have time. We'll wrap up definitely before noon, sometime before that, and some quick announcements at the end. There will be, for those of you who want one, a certificate of attendance, and that will be put in the chat linked for you today. There will be some handouts. Freddie prefers that those handouts be available afterwards, so that will happen. And then all of you, whether you're here today or those who registered but were not able to attend, will receive a recording and the handouts. We're going to aim to do that in 5 days or less from our volunteer group. All right, enough of that. I see, I'm just looking over at the chat again, more people, lovely from all over. This is so nice. But we want to get started with the real event today. Our guest presenter, Dr. Freddy Hiebert, who I know you're here because you already know about this long, distinguished, award-winning career that she's had. You may not know that Freddie started way back when as a teacher's aide and a primary teacher in California. Then she worked as a teacher educator and a researcher at several different esteemed universities and settings. And that research she's left and continues to leave. She's still active as a researcher, a legacy in research over the decades, focusing on fluency and vocabulary, knowledge building using appropriate texts. If you know your history of reading in the United States and globally, you know these amazing contributions that Freddie participated in, becoming a nation of readers and every child a reader. But she is not done. Her efforts today, including doing presentations at conferences and webinars such as this, she and her team have an amazing project that she's going to tell us a little bit more about today, textproject.org. So I'm ready, I know you are, to hear from Freddie about the new science of vocabulary, talking about how AI can support teachers to support students' language learning. So Freddie, I'm going to stop sharing and you can share when you're ready.
Thanks, Jan, for that lovely introduction. And thank you all for joining us on a Saturday morning, or for some of you, different times of the day.
Mhm.
Um, I'm talking specifically when I look at the global reach that you've had at Read Washington. Um, I'm talking about some of the things that we've done in American reading education. Uh, As some of you might know, in the US, we do some interesting things. And even though I'm Canadian by birth and also a Canadian passport holder, I want to be clear that what I'm talking about today is about the models that have been prominent in the United States. So, for about a century, what you see on the right-hand side of the screen are the rare words in a text in a basal or core reading program. There are a lot of rare words, which is pretty typical. This is a third grade text. And you can see on the left-hand side, these are the words that have been chosen for instruction. So if you look at these words, chimed, concluded, flickered, gallant, preparation, slender, you're kind of going, I wonder what this story could be about. And some of you, if you've actually taught with this program, you might know what it's about, but that's kind of all over the board. And I'm going to say that what we've typically done is somewhere, you know, typically in a publishing house, has cherry picked some words for instruction. Now, when it gets to informational text, again, the words on the right-hand side, the rare words in the text. But when we look at the words in a informational text that have been called out for instruction, we see that we are getting some kind of an idea that there must be something happening with some kind of a scientific process here. So those words are a little bit more spot on, but we're still not quite sure how they all lend themselves. Like, is the word snug and perch really critical in understanding whatever is happening in this book? Now, Gina Cervetti and her colleagues, first of all with Tanya Wright, and then in a meta-analysis of vocabulary, has said that this process doesn't improve kids' generalized comprehension, nor does it improve their generalized vocabulary. That doesn't mean that the kids don't, these specific words like outfitted or snug, that doesn't mean that they might not remember those words. We don't know exactly for how long because a lot of the studies haven't looked at that. But what we know is that this method of vocabulary selection hasn't done a lot to improve either our kids' comprehension or vocabulary knowledge. And I'm going to suggest today that the combination of what I'm going to call big data and AI, and I will define what big data is in a minute, when we look at these 5 pillars from the National Reading Panel, I'm dubious that we're going to find out any new letter sound correspondences in English. I think comprehension strategies are actually going to be more compelling and needed, but are we going to discover new ones? I'm not so sure, but it is with vocabulary and the influence that our knowledge of vocabulary has for fluency, for the texts on which kids develop their automaticity. I'm going to say that this is a game changer, truly a game changer. I don't think we've had an opportunity like this ever for us to really understand what can support kids. And I'm going to start by saying the basis of all of this is something called big data. So when we started having access to digital systems, computer systems, people started putting in, and we had access to scanners. People started putting in large corpora, large groups of words, and they began to uncover some of the connections between those words and also which words were dominant in different situations. Okay, so I'm saying big data influenced a lot. And one way it influenced us is that it gave us these large collections of words. So we, for a long, long time, I keep thinking of the graduate students at Teachers College who must have worked with Edward Thorndike in identifying the words. He started out with 20,000, then he went eventually to 40,000, but he basically used the Bible and it was all hand counted, right? And at that point, the number of children's books wasn't great. And what you're seeing here, so let's just take a look at the word able and the word count are given the same frequency. And words within the top groups of words are words like accompany, Abram, a bridge, which gives you some idea of where this corpus comes from. The situation has changed a lot. So in 1995, people at TASA identified a very representative group of words from different content areas and from different grade levels. And that database has been very influential. For example, in the new developmental English lexicon project from Florida State, this database was actually used in that. Now, at TextProject, we've got well over 10 million words that we've entered. This is all proprietorial. We can't release it. Now, mind you, at Metametrics, they've got billions of words from text, and those are very much proprietorial. But what I'm saying is, once you've got a database that we can actually access, and I have a text processor that I use, we can start looking at what makes first grade text different than second grade text, than third grade text, and so on. Okay. The other thing that big data has shifted is our understanding of the features of words. This has been major. So when I started, my word zone profiler is what I call the little machine that I have. Um, I actually had two measures. I had high frequency words and I had the decodability based on a scheme that a graduate student and I at Michigan had developed. Okay, two measures. In 2020, I actually had about 20 measures. Okay, so now I'm being able to look at let me just see, Bob Marzano's superclusters. I can look at how frequently words are dispersed across content areas. I can look at when words are predicted to appear in children's language, what the morphological, excuse me, the rhyme family is that the words are in. That's a game changer, but look at this. In 2024, at Scope, which is an open access database, you can now look at information on 250 features of words. So what I'm saying here is that we have access to understanding a lot of things about words from big databases. And also we can describe and then we can backtrack and see how some of these features influence kids' recognition of words and memory of words, right? So this is what big data makes possible. English doesn't have the biggest lexicon in the world, but one of the biggest. And we're not going into that today. Well, actually, we are at the end, but it has to do with the different etymological sources of English. We start out as a German, Anglo-Saxon language. We had French, and then eventually we had, during the Renaissance, we had Greek words. So that means that in English, we just have a lot of words, a lot of words. This is from the Oxford English Dictionary. And when we say we have about 300,000 root words, that doesn't include the multiple meanings of words. And as English serves a conduit within a global society, it turns out that the meanings of words are changing rapidly. So new meanings are being added, right? If you think about a word like mouse or a word like, mouse pad or something like that. Okay, what this allows us to do, and this is something that comes out of the research my colleagues and I have done, is we can take a look. Now, we've always known, Thorndike told us, that there were some words that accounted for the majority of the words in text. A man called Zipf told us that in 1935. But now we can actually come up with specific categories. Okay, so what you're seeing here is that about 94%, and this is school text, 94% of the words in school text are accounted for by about 2,500 morphological word families. And a word family is like help, helper, helps, helpful, unhelpful, and so on. Then you've got another approximately 3,000 words from a group of families. And keep remembering, each of these families averages about 5 words. And then this is where you have this is where new words get put in. Sometimes those new words slowly morph, like the word morph, into the low frequency group, but rarely do new words come into the medium frequency and the high frequency group. And by the way, the high frequency group is not just the Dolch words. There are other words. In fact, a lot of the general academic words are there. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that often, see the dark purple words? Those have often been the words that we've chosen to emphasize for vocabulary instruction. That's kind of fun, but it turns out if you're not good at about 95% of the words, like highly automatic, it's going to be hard to continue to integrate all of these rare words. And in typical elementary text at this point, we don't have control vocabulary in US text. We typically see about 5 of these purple words. That doesn't mean you can't decode them, but we see about 5 of the purple words in every 100 words kids read. So that gives you some background. So what I'm saying is we start out with these big piles of words. We run them through this funnel that I'm calling big data, and we get these groups of words. And now that we've got the groups of words, we can actually start doing something with AI. Okay, so I'm just saying there's the distinction between having all this information about the words in text, and then AI can help us target the words. It can help us in our teaching of words, and it can help us in the assessment. And I'm actually saying that each of these categories is really a game changer. They're things that we haven't been able to do as teachers. And I want to also emphasize that I'm talking about us as teachers using this, not as kids. Don't have any expertise in the use of young people and children with AI. My expertise lies with teachers. Okay, so selecting target words and text. So this is the text from which these words came. And what you're seeing here is these words occur really infrequently. And I think you could teach flickered forever. And I'm not sure many kids are going to remember that, especially if they've seen it once in a text. A word like preparation, it's a very different kind of word than gallant. And that only appears once. Okay, so what I do, and when you see a red box around something, that means that I asked AI a question. So you'll get this information, so you'll have all these prompts. But what I did is I took the words that the publisher had identified for teaching, like gallant, and then I took other words that it seemed to me, you see, most of them are multisyllabic, celebrated, decorations, donations. We know from research that multisyllabic words, especially three-syllable words and more, are ones that really challenge our kids through the grades. I want to just see, do you see that I'm saying words that will extend beyond third grade and support the reading in the middle grades? So I'm not just interested in this particular text. I want to see what we can do with words beyond that. And this is what AI told me. It said that of the words that were targeted, only 2 of them really have high value. Okay, it says that slender, it's a descriptive word, not much academic utility. And what I didn't ask is whether these would be words that kids could actually figure out with their decoding and the presence of an informative context. The next question was, what are words that are valuable for long-term academic success? And here you see the response. I wanted to know, because this is about a performance, the kids in this story, the storyteller's candle, are getting a performance ready. Was there something specific? See, I'm always looking for background knowledge. How could we connect these words into something that actually supports kids in understanding a context? Not just random words, but words that connect. And finally, is there something that could build background knowledge, like Fiesta? Okay, I did the same thing with Quest for the tree frog. And as you see here, one of the words that was called out for instruction was actually on a picture. But what you're seeing again is, the words snug and perch. I'm hoping that you could figure that out with your decoding in third or fourth grade, or the word beaming or perch even. Okay, so here I ask, again, this is going to be a little harder to read, but what are the essential words? And this is and by the way, I use Claude AI, I use ChatGPT, and I use Google Gemini. So what it's saying is, of the words that were there, that they actually introduced, they said procedure, calculate, and transferred are likely important words in terms of this particular text. Now, here's the deal with text and AI. There's been a lot of, as it well should be, restrictions into what AI can actually harvest. So a lot of the really good children's books aren't within the domain of AI. In other words, they haven't a scanned version, unless somebody put a scanned version on the internet. And one of the things I see is lots and lots of scanned versions for different schools and classrooms. Whenever that happens, AI can actually access it. But even if AI can't access it, AI has a lot of information about the background for text. So they use, for example, the Horn book, the descriptions of books on Amazon, and so on. So it's saying of the other words, snug, perch, outfitted, and presence, helpful but not essential. And here they said these are actually not essential words at all. Okay, then I wanted to know, um, and in this case, yes, I actually put the whole text in. So I want to be clear about that. That's probably something that you should take out of my statement, Jan, when you distribute this video. No, but these are the words that the AI said in relation to this text were really important ones. You know, the tree kangaroo is really elusive, which makes for the whole text that the writers are talking about, the procedure they use, putting on a transmitter, and so on. These are essential words. Take a look at them. I mean, they're all multisyllabic words. Tracker, not a hard one, but they're words that kids, without having good multisyllabic decoding strategies, these are good words to teach. These are good words for helping kids develop some background knowledge. So that's my first point. Do you have some takeaways from selecting words? So what I've said to this point is that with big corpora, with big collections of words, and the ability to take a look at the features of words, we now have a really good understanding and we can do really good research on what features influence kids' recognition. And that information can be fed into our selection of the words that we choose for particular text. And what I've been saying is, even if the text isn't in the AI database, it's possible to really get some good understandings about what words are important. So, Jan, are there any questions in the chat now as to what I've been saying so far?
Um, Not specifically, it's more general about curriculum. The question is about curriculum companies using these tools. Are you aware of any of that?
Well, I think curriculum companies, so, I said that I had actually put this text in, and as a researcher in a not-for-profit, on a presentation for which I'm um, not requesting any reimbursement. It's legal for me to do this. So, but it wouldn't be for publishers.
Right.
But here's the thing that you could do is you could take groups of words like this and just say, on this topic, which of these words would be important to know? I want to underscore also for you that AI can't give you a lexile of a text because the lexile process is proprietary to metametrics.
Oh.
Okay. But it can, and I'll show you as I move along. I always say I'm working with kids who aren't enthusiastic or incredibly accomplished readers.
Mhm.
Here's a group of words. Which words would be words that are really worth teaching? Okay. So could a curriculum person, unless, and one of the things I do notice is a lot of texts have been put up by schools and by individual teachers, so the kids can read them at home. So whenever that happens, AI has access to it. But keep remembering that the databases, like the TASA, the Educators Word Frequency Database, that's all available on that scope. So if you want to know what words are going to be hard, you can actually go to some of these places and put the words in there. So publishers can do that.
Hmm. So they can do that. Maybe
Yes.
some already are. One more question before we let you go on. Kimberly is stating that AI often hallucinates. How are you verifying the validity of the rules that the answers you're getting?
Well, I do a lot of checks, right?
Yeah.
This to me looks like a reasonable set of words. And I've done enough work with these three AI platforms that the AI has a good understanding of what I'm working to accomplish. So I don't get wacky words. So for example, I didn't get the word dwarfed, didn't come up in this. Okay. These were words that really had to do with the key ideas that were important to this text. So um, I'm not seeing that, the hallucination.
Hmm.
But keep
Okay.
remembering, I'm working on a very specific domain, and I've also been very clear about what my domain and my needs are
Yeah.
over an extended period of time. And I'm actually seeing that things are getting much better, in 2026 than they were when I started out in 2023.
Well, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
One additional
Well, by
question.
the way, just a second, Jan,
Yeah.
where it can
Yeah.
really hallucinate is giving you, you know, if you ask for a research citation,
Oh,
you'll find that like Jan and I have written extensively together, even though we haven't. I
right.
mean, so that's a real hallucination. So if you're thinking
Mm.
of doing your dissertation with AI, just be aware of that.
Be
Yeah.
careful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Buyer beware. There is a question about the fact that the criteria you're using to select words, there's a question about English learners or students who are learning English as a second language. For those students, this person says they would need to choose additional words depending on their word knowledge, their English proficiency level. Have you ever used their EAL level in the prompt when searching for word lists?
Yes. And I have. And we could also get, if there's Spanish speakers, we could get some cognates here. But
Hmm.
I also want to be clear, and this I think is a really important emphasis on the choosing of words. I was going to go back to the beginning, but that's just going to make you sick if I backtrack everywhere. But the deal is, if there are about five hard words, or rare words, they're not necessarily hard, like slender, you could explain really quickly. But if there are about five rare words in every 100 words kids read, in an 800 word text, that's a lot of words. So rare words, right? About 40. And what I'm suggesting is you can't expect to teach all of them. And what I'm really emphasizing here today is pick the ones that matter the most, the ones that give you the greatest spread. And I think that that's also really critically important for English language learners. Okay, the ones that I
Yeah.
work with at least. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to our next topic, which is teaching words explicitly. And I'm going to give you three strategies, and I'm giving them in the order that I believe there's the most utility. And by the way, for that question about the English language learners, this is a place where you can very nicely build in additional words. Okay, so if there are additional words that you think your English language learners might not know, this is a good place to put them. So the first two strategies that I'm going to actually show you here have to do with teaching kids about how we talk a lot about morphological families, but one of the things we haven't done enough is semantic families. In a language like English that has two fundamental linguistic sources. And I saw that Louisa Moats was on here, and I'm sure that she could expand on this, and I'm not giving this due um, due credit at all. But when you've got a lot of words from different languages, a word like agile isn't going to be used a lot. That's fairly rare. Or elusive in this context. That's a really important word in this text, but it is unlikely to appear a lot in text. And what I'm saying is that when we organize these words, and I'm going to suggest initially that these semantic maps be ones that teachers construct, not ones that you just give to kids, but once you've constructed it, can you now pick out some words that are central that your kids can now go into the book and take a look for words that are related? And this is where that question about all of the many words that might not be covered can actually start entering into the conversation. Okay. As teachers, this notion of a semantic map, what's connected in this text? These are really important ideas. In an informational text, the semantic characteristics function very differently than in a story. Keep remembering, right, that in stories, there are always a lot more rare words than there are in informational text. In an informational text, the rare words are always repeated more frequently. So we're going to come back to some of these words, so I just want you to keep them in mind. This is a semantic map. By the way, that question about hallucination. So when I started out using AI, it made really great semantic maps like this one. I can't get any of the sites to do this anymore. With different colors. What they do are these listing of things. But I thought this was pretty amazing when I gave some words from the book, The Storyteller's Candle, that it actually looked at words like words that related to flickered and twinkled and sparkled, because, the candle is important in this book. So here were some light effects. Here were some responses of the audience, applause and celebrate. And here was what you needed to do to prepare. By the way, I didn't give AI these categories. Okay, so it was actually clustering words. That's one of the things that it can do well, is cluster words around particular groups. But again, the research, there's some very strong meta-analysis that tell us that when kids build the semantic maps themselves, their learning is really supported. So I'm suggesting that as teachers, we start out so we actually know how to connect some of these words during our instruction. And we can help kids make choices about what might be the most important word to start a semantic map with. Okay, just a second. I'm going to talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to just take a little beverage break here. Just a minute.
You take your beverage break, and I'm going to read to you from the chat that Louisa commented that she loved this emphasis on conceptual organization of words. She's saying it's the meanings that link words in our mental dictionaries, but we need to give those categories to kids and illustrate how they are related.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Louisa. I'm going to ask Jan for that, and I'm actually going to put that up on my bulletin board. So when I get discouraged and wonder why I do these things, I will take a look at that. Um,
Saved. I will. It's saved. I will give it to
okay.
you.
So I want to point out that if I could give you one thing, and we could stop now, and this is, I've been talking for almost a half hour, and a half hour of me is a lot. I get tired from it. But if I had one activity as a teacher for you to do, it is understanding how the various words in the text connect to each other. Now, you know that, oops, in a story, the words in stories are very different in how they cluster, right? Than in informational text. So in stories, they cluster around events, they cluster around people, they cluster around things like, preparing for an event or the characteristics of things. So that can be really important. The second activity, I'm kind of going in order of what I think is just um, really supportive for you, and that is generating semantic grids or gradients. Often these are called gradients. So this is what I did, and this is truly the prompt that I gave. And what I ask is, can you take these words? Because, just because they didn't come up as some of the most conceptually important words in this text, with all the preparations and donations and the audience and applause and so on that occurred in the text, really hard multisyllabic words. What I thought is, flickering, sparkled, and twinkled, those are pretty interesting words. And so I ask it, can you find five other words? But here's the really important characteristic here. Can you ensure that two of the new words are ones that students who are not great third grade readers can read? I always put that in there. I want the kids who aren't, I always want to build on what the kids know. Okay. So that to me is really, really important. So words like shine and flash, what you're seeing here, and I've not had as much success now as I did at the beginning, maybe because I presented on this too much, but I actually got AI to give this in different colors of intensity. Okay. So this gives you some examples of words around this flickering family. And here we have words around announce. And you see we've got words like tell and say and shout. Okay. I always want to contextualize things for kids in what it is they know. And for kids who are English language learners, for our kids whose parents didn't get the memo that, should basically make sure your kids are already reading when they go to kindergarten. Excuse me, I try really hard not to use my sense of humor in webinars because in person you can actually see when I think I'm being sardonic. Hard to do in a webinar. But so I'm just saying for the kids who depend on public schools to become highly literate, starting with what they know is just absolutely critical. And if I were doing this with a group of kids I live in Santa Cruz, California, we have a lot of kids who are in families that speak Spanish. I'd actually use the cognates here as well. Okay, here are words around around the tree kangaroo. And again, do you see quick, steady, slippery, secretive? So you're getting some notion of what this word elusive means. Keep remembering that in a really good text, even an informational text that is descriptive, like tree kangaroo, not a textbook informational text, authors aren't going to keep using those same words over and over again, right? So they're going to use different words, and kids need to be ready for that plethora of different words. Okay, I I just want to say I think that these two activities, I think that getting kids to think about semantic families, I mean, what we've been doing is teaching one word at a time. And what I'm asking you to think about is what's the semantic family, not just the morphological family, that a word fits into, right? Some of you have heard me describe that I learned to read with Dick and Jane. And yes, we had Dick and Jane in a little hamlet in Saskatchewan. And, Dick and Jane had obsessive compulsive disorder and they repeated everything and then the same word every time, like run, 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 stop, 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 yes, yes, yes. That's not how good literature works. And what we want kids to be expecting is that this author is going to tell you these tree kangaroos move really strangely. They're agile, but they're also very elusive. They're hard to find. And that author isn't going to always use that same word. And I want you to be ready for that. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on morphological families, but they do a great job of identifying the morphological families. This is straight from an AI, the little red box AI request. And here are the morphological families for tree kangaroos. As you can tell, as the years have gone by, I've been getting less dramatic, um, examples of semantic families and semantic grids. I also want to say, I think, and yes, I created that little thing on the right-hand side. It looks like a peach or an apple, but it's really supposed to be a brain. And what I want kids to do is collect words. And as you see on one side, they're the semantic family, and on the other side, it's the morphological family. I want kids to actually have, I call them neural neighborhoods. You can call them anything you want, but I think it's important. See, when we looked at those 5 to 7 words to teach for a week, what we actually want to show is that we're teaching about language, how language works, and we're being generative. There's so many more words that you can know about. Okay, Jen, I never thought I would actually maybe run out of time, but I have to keep going here. So I've talked about these semantic level activities, which I think are game changers. Now I want to show you how you can generate text sets with a critical vocabulary. And for the question about English language learners, this is really, really critical. We made a major shift in American textbooks when we moved in the late 1990s with the California and Texas adoptions from any control of vocabulary, which means that many words are often one-time appearances in programs. Barbara Foreman and David Francis did a fabulous description of that in 24 in Scientific Studies of Reading. And it's a really important notion that I'm a strong believer in Mark Seidenberg's notion that, and in Linnea Erie, that you've absolutely got to have exposure. And the volume of the data that you see is really important. So this is what I tell AI when I write these books. And honestly, I don't say I want a third grade level because right now I don't exactly know what third grade level is because we change it around so much, because we aren't using controlled vocabulary, but you get some idea of what I'm asking them to do. So remember, I wanted to give background knowledge about preparing for a play. So here's one of the texts that does that. Here's one of, by the way, AI is much, much better at creating informational text than it is in creating narrative text. And I think, please don't think that my inclusion of pictures is endorsing the picture text match, something that I thought was aberrant from the day I first read about it. You don't want to encourage kids to be using pictures to figure out words, because it turns out, at least in the United States, kids are not bad with figuring out pictures. It's words that they're having some issues with. So I use pictures just for engagement. I use them because I think it takes something that's really flat and it makes you maybe want to spend some time with it. And for the kids who depend on schools to become highly literate, I think that's an important thing to invite them. I think a picture like this is just absolutely great. And here these kids had put on a play. First one, we described how to put on a play. Now there's a play. And yes, I call these AI curated because I go through and when somebody asked about hallucinating, some of the stuff is bland. Stories are much better. Informational text is much better. And in stories, you actually have to do a fair amount of work. Now I asked, same kind of thing. The stories are aimed for third graders who are neither highly automatic or motivated as readers. And this time I took a slightly different set of words. Okay, so what's a fiesta? Again, informational text, really pretty straightforward to write in these texts. And I am going to, at the end, show you some examples of how I go about doing this curation. But they actually don't require the same level of editing and curation that stories do. Okay, so once I've done this, take a look here. I've now, announcement was 2 times in the text. That's an announcement. That's not enough time to get very good at it. Applause, unusual word, 5 times. And you're seeing here, right? The number of times with these 4 texts, I've increased the repetitions of the words. We're now getting into we have very poor data on and the data depends on what the word is and its concreteness, its length, and a lot of other factors. But we don't know exactly how much you typically need to repeat with words that are multisyllabic like these. I think we're now getting into the ballpark. Now, I'm going to actually hurry through this, but I've actually picked the topics here because I looked at this text on tree frogs, tree kangaroos, and I was kind of like, I had so many questions. It wasn't a particularly well-written text, even though it's gotten a lot of hype. And I wanted to know, especially, how are they different than typical kangaroos? Because they never said anything about that. And what I said is, I want you to ensure words agile, elusive, transmit, frequency. Okay, so, and you can use morphological, I want you to actually use morphological family members. And this is what I got. Okay, by the way, some of you are wondering where these pictures come from. I use a website and I pay about 75 cents to $1 per picture. And I know that that's pricey for some of you. It's called Dreams Time. But you can get some fabulous pictures. And you're going to see as I go along that I've started using some of the pictures that ChatGPT and Gemini will give us. Okay, so how do scientists track tree kangaroos? This is really interesting information. And, you know, I'm a strong believer, and if you go onto TextProject, you'll see that one of the things I'm really working on right now are something called background builders, especially when we're giving novels to middle schoolers and high school kids. There's so much background that our kids don't have. And I'm saying these texts build background. By the way, they're all available right at TextProject, so you don't have to be taking pictures and trying to reproduce them. How do you keep them safe? And then here's the piece on, excuse me, on how what's the same and what's different about kangaroos and tree kangaroos, which is something that I personally had a very strong interest in. You should just see the topics that I've gotten good at since I've been writing these background builders on texts that are in core reading programs or that are novels that are being read in school. I am such an interesting conversationalist at a dinner party. It's unbelievable because I have so many snippets of information to give. I do notice that my husband and I don't get invited back, but for the initial dinner at least, I have given people a lot of really good information. So that, by the way, is part of my sense of humor in case you hadn't caught that. So for those of you from Canada, you know that one of our biggest resources is humor. And all of us in Canada basically come from the deep south of Canada where we always say, y'all come back, eh? That's about as good as my Canadian jokes get. So, okay. Um, I didn't do quite as good with some of the repetition, but you see that some of the really hard words, I mean, I've actually increased like elusive to 3 repetitions rather than 1. Agile was never in the text, but it's an important part of what it means. Nor was sedated, by the way. Sedated was never in the text. Okay. Wow. What do you think, Jan? So what have I said? Teaching words, I've talked about 3 strategies. I've talked about semantic maps. That's the place, if you haven't been using AI, I'd start with, so that you've got an idea of what the connections are across concepts in the text you're teaching. The grids, I think, are so important. I think you can do some of these and then have kids sort them, rather than kids trying to find the words. Sometimes that can be pretty hard. but they can maybe collect. I showed you the neural networks. They can be collecting words. And then finally, I said writing background builders, I think, can be really important to extend kids' conversation. So I think I was supposed to actually have one more section here before I showed the signs. So let me do that, okay? No, that was it. Okay, I was really intended to do that. Okay, Jen, are there any questions?
You're doing great on time, and this is, yeah, really informative. I can tell you, Louisa commented again, previous slide when you were showing the degrees of meaning affirmed by AI. She said that we call this scaling, but to have AI verifying the degrees of meaning is very affirming. There is a question about, or maybe sort of a comment from Therese, who was saying, it sounds as if I were teaching a set of morphemes, I would want to ask AI to create stories or informational text using words with these morphemes for students to practice both their reading fluency and to connect semantic meaning. So any comment on that?
So, Therese, that's actually the very last part of the presentation that I added on yesterday when Jen told me that there were actually, I had a little bit more than usually about 40 minutes is the max that people can listen to me because then they start kind of getting glossy-eyed. But that's a really hard question, Therese, because um, if they're Latin-based, French-based words like announced, unannounced, the texts that you get are really wonky. And I'm going to show you how I've been kind of working around that. I think they actually have to be in sets of morphologically rich families. And you have to have a really good topic. So I'm going to actually show you how to do that. And at TextProject on this new thing that I'm developing called word roots, I actually have some texts that are based on the Anglo-Saxon etymological layer, the French Latin layer, and the Greek layer. The Greek layer is really fun to write because there are some really interesting words and you can write about the words. The most of the word, and similarly with the Anglo-Saxon, there are a lot of compound words or inflected endings and you can make some nice stories or informational text. But notice a lot of the words in the French Latin are the general academic words that are really pretty abstract. So that makes it hard to write text, but I'll show you what I've done. And you can see that I've been trying to do that and offer some of those texts at TextProject. Okay, we ready to move on?
Proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so the last part of this is um, this is a wow, I hadn't thought about this, but here I am talking to the person who has guided me so much on oral reading fluency. And I asked to see somebody's picture while I'm talking, and Jan volunteered to be the face that I could see, which I really, really appreciate because I'm a teacher and I don't just like talking to myself. So thank you, Jan. But, you know, one of the things that happened when Jay Samuels and LaBerge talked about automaticity at Minnesota and people like the Fuchses and Stan Dino and Jerry Tyndall and the whole group of people, Joe Jenkins, who was at UW, um, it was easy to apply that to oral reading fluency. It was much harder at that point to apply it to silent reading fluency. And I'm saying we have an opening now where we can do both. And by the way, the person who asked about the hallucination, this is where you can get a lot of hallucination. I don't know, Jan, if you want to comment, you might comment at the end. But what I'm saying is we can now create some really cool maze assessments, but you really have to train. It doesn't come on your first round. Okay, so the one that I worked on here, this wasn't a first timer, and I had to read through and make sure the words really worked. Okay, so what I'm saying is we can get assessments of vocabulary now and of silent reading automaticity in a way that we haven't with the text that we're having kids read. We haven't had that access to that. I know that as a classroom teacher, for me to create one of these, do you know, I started out about 7 years ago at TextProject to create a set of maze passages. And one of the passages like this would take me about 3 days to do because I'd have to have lists of words with the same length, with the same meaning. It just was forever. So I'm just saying, with a couple tries, I can get good at this. Okay. So this is an example. AI is fabulous at generating sentences. Okay. You can get some really, really good sentences. Be sure before you pass them out that you read them through and that you make sure that, especially if you're using morphological families, that they actually fit. Because once you're into morphological families, it can be hard to know which of the words is really appropriate. Is it produce? Is it producers? Is it, you know, production? Okay. Just because this is good and easy to create, let's not go overboard. Okay. But this is a great way. Look at how I can assess the vocabulary. I couldn't do that even 5 years ago as easily as that, specific to the words that I've been teaching. And by the way, when I write these, I also have something called the Core Vocabulary Assessment with ROAR, ROAR at Stanford. And one of the things that I always do with vocabulary assessment is I make sure that the words in the sentence are easier than my target word. So I know that I'm actually capturing the critical word. Um, Here are some semantic family members. Same kind of thing where I can actually see how kids, this is a lot harder because some of these words will actually, because they're semantic family members, they could fit in more than one go. So the hallucinatory effect you have to check out. And this is where I'm saying you really have to understand whether, in fact, you have to go through and make sure that these all fit. Okay, so I did that pretty quickly. Um, Jan, are there any questions? I'm just saying it's this is a game changer. I can actually now see how kids are doing with a specific. And keep remembering what I do here, really important to keep in mind. The word streamers is hard, but I work hard to not have words in the stem that are harder than the word itself. I want to be sure that they can read these words automatically. So are there some questions here, Jan?
No, I think the questions, I think you're answering the questions as you're going along. Everyone's fascinated by this. I know I am. I had not thought about using AI to create assessments like the maze. This is just a game changer
It really is.
because it can be so specific. So it just ups the value of progress monitoring, which we know from 40 some years of research, these CBM assessments work as general outcome measures, but making them more specific to the actual content you're teaching does two things at once. It can continue to serve as a general outcome measure. Is your instruction helping the student overall become a better reader? But are they actually learning the vocabulary and the concepts that you're teaching? It's kind of two for one. I'm really excited about that. And you mentioned the core assessment
Yeah.
tool and Roar. I'm hoping that we can put those links in the chat so other
Yeah,
people can take a
one
look
of the
at this.
problems is that Roar right now functions as, you sign up as a school,
Yeah,
so
okay.
people can't just go on and get that. I need to revisit that because I didn't know when I uh, gave it to them that I wouldn't be able to just send people there to have I that I couldn't just send people there to have that assessment.
Oh, okay.
But you know
Okay.
what?
But a lot of these people are, a lot of folks here are affiliated with a school, could
Yeah.
get access that way.
Yeah. And what I'm also saying is there isn't any reason, I mean, why not keep why not keep the assessment specific to what you're actually teaching?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think that,
There is one question that just
okay,
popped up from Dr. Bailey. How important is it to create vocabulary assessments that mirror the standardized assessments, the selected responses? Um,
when they say, what does that mean,
yeah,
selected response?
I'm a little confused too.
Is
Um,
that like when you have multiple choice? So
I would assume, yeah, that would
yeah,
be my
I have
assumption.
not, that's not true because when I generate new items for the core vocabulary assessment, I actually use AI. And that is, so on the core vocabulary assessment, it has a sentence. Keep remembering every microphone probably shouldn't fit in there. But everything in the sentence, my cousin made, and okay, everything should be a word that's easier than the target word. And then it turns out that the choices, the selections, both the distractors and the right response are also easier than the target word.
Hmm.
That's how I've constructed the test because I want to know. See, what I'm interested is in automaticity
Yeah.
with these words, and it's not truly a measure of vocabulary if one of the distractors is harder than the word that you're asking them to read. You know, so that's something I really, really work hard on. Okay, let me just summarize here. So, what have I talked about? I've talked about selecting words to teach. I've been saying that we can get some really strong information as teachers around the underlying concepts. And you know what I didn't do here? I just realized, Jan, I didn't talk about what happens when you have a chapter book or like a middle grade book.
Yeah,
All
and
the
somebody in the chat actually a bit earlier mentioned, sadly, this was Kimberly, sadly, I don't think many middle and high school students are reading complete novels.
Well, let's just say they're reading two or three short stories that connect to each other, okay? What I want to point out is that as narrative gets harder, and by that I'm meaning, as you're moving into the fourth and fifth grade, a lot of the key words in stories are not actually in the story. A lot of the key concepts aren't actually in the story. So, I mean, I have a paper that I can share with all of you that got rejected twice at reading teacher, but we're not going to go there and, rant about that. That's not appropriate. Um, but it did get accepted at Phi Delta Kappa, and it's just not in print yet. But I can share that with your team, with the folks online here, Jan. But what I do is I take Ninth Ward, which is a fabulous story from middle school kids about a girl during Katrina in the Ninth Ward. And it turns out all the big words like fortitude, perseverance, all those words, they never ever appear in the text. But the ideas are there. And AI can be very helpful in helping you identify the places that actually support you in understanding that word, okay, that underlying the concept. Am I making sense here? I'm saying that the big ideas in really good literature are often not actually explicitly stated in the text, but are implied by the movement of characters or by the way characters speak. So, for example, if a character is secretive or, malicious, they might be described as eavesdropping,
Mm.
right? They're not going to say the character is malicious. They're going to tell you ways in which the character manipulates. So that's a very big difference. I really apologize for not attending to that today. Um,
Well, you are now. That I think that's very helpful for me. It ties into a lot what I'm hearing from Tim Shanahan in his new book, where he's talking about the importance of teaching from complex text And one of the things that makes, and I always need to add, he makes that point, it's important to teach students in complex text after they have become established readers. So he does say that, and I always want to emphasize that. But that should be starting like for a lot of kids as early as late second grade, early third grade. But he does also make the point, I think, in his book very clearly that one of the things that makes that text for older students more complex is how much inference they have to
Right,
do. Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's one of the things I don't think um, I have a new product at Text Project called Story Labs, and they're not Reader's Digest, but they're kind of overviews of classics and then current texts like Lightning Thief. The Outsiders is one of them. Frankenstein, Princess Bride. We do a lot of memes come from books like that. And so I actually want kids to have exposures to that, if even if they never read those books. Not Reader's Digest, but some background knowledge. And one of the things that just strikes me when I start looking at what is regarded to be the canon in middle schools and high schools in the United States, and I know there's a lot of discussion about that and differences in different school districts, but a lot of the books, they just don't have, I mean, think about a book about the Dust Bowl. I mean, we don't have that kind of thing happening. There's dust storms, there's sandstorms, but windstorms, blizzards, but not in the way that it continued for a decade. And I think some of those ideas are really important. And that's why I've been doing these background builders. Yeah. Okay. I just want to say there's some potential problems with AI. I'm not saying this is the be all and end all. Please don't think that. And I have not said anything about kids using it. But I think you really, as somebody said, Jan, really early on, somebody said, what about the curriculum? You've
Yes.
got to have a curriculum and developmental progression. I mean, I hear people, and I see it online, here, get your decodables with AI and make them up and make them personalized. You have to have a curriculum and a developmental progression to create books. I'm also afraid of the lowest hanging fruit, that we're actually going to have even more worksheets and fewer opportunities to deal with complex text. And I want to remind people that knowledge is the commodity of the digital age, and fatuous texts and worksheets are going to be a barrier to knowledge acquisition, and also a deterrent to motivation and learning. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about TextProject. I don't know if this has been a lot that I've covered, but this is what I want to do, Jan, for the next 20 minutes, if it's okay.
Perfect.
I can answer questions, but here's what I have. I have a little unit on using AI to curate text, to how I make text, like for older readers too. But I want to talk about the staircase. And then what else do I have? Oh, I have the thing about the making text for morphological families. So that's what, now that you've all seen it, it's done. And then I also wanted to show you that there is at the end um, a list of references, because I want to be clear that I'm a researcher and I'm not just making things up because I think it's really cute. And also, that you can get the copy. But let's go back here. Now that you've seen it all, you have a really good overview. That's a prior knowledge setting activity. Okay, let me tell you about the text-to-text project. These texts aren't just any texts, nor are they intended to be used forever and for the whole school day. These aren't programs. What I have created here are texts to be used for automaticity. From my perspective, from the research that I've seen, read, and done, the biggest problem from students, at least in the United States, and again, remember that I'm speaking to a specific context, is that except for the bottom 5 to 6% who have some neurological, biological issues, a lot of our kids, when you look at the data from Dibbles, at eighth grade, what you're seeing is that by the seventh and eighth percentile, kids are at about 95% accuracy. That test is the Dibbles oral reading fluency is not a no-brainer. It's not easy peasy. And I'm saying that if you can, they read slowly, really, really, really slowly. But if you can recognize 95% of the words on that text, I can work with you. There's something we can work with you on that. And I'm saying what we can work on is text that are built to support automaticity with those. Remember, I showed you that the 5,500 most frequent word families that account for about 98% of the words in text. The text-to-text project, and we're transitioning to this color scheme, so if it's not quite there yet, give us a little time. But the first 4 steps have to do with words that are highly decodable. I call these phonics readers because they're not decodable in the same sense that the letter to text match is in many state adoptions. Okay, so things like the decodable text, the primary topic reads and beginning reads, they're supporting kids on developing the 300 most frequent words and consistent vowel patterns and monosyllabic words. But they don't all happen in the first step, okay? So you're moving up the staircase. And I want to say that all these texts, Joe Torgerson used to say that I engineered text. I don't know if that was a compliment or not, but if some of you don't know, remember his work. He has contributed dearly to our profession. But the texts are intended to emphasize certain words. And, you know, I think I made my point here. The next set of texts, the rainbow texts, are really around kids in the middle grades to middle school. And this is where we have the biggest problems with automaticity. And we actually have, in the case of topic reads, it is a whole intervention. That's the only program we have. It was an intervention. It was sold by a publisher. They decided not to sell it anymore. I got the rights back. I had to get new pictures because I only got the words back, but I liked the words. So I'm saying that in the topic reads, you move from the 500 to 1,000, you keep moving up that staircase. And in these texts, the words that are rare appear only account for 2% of the text, and they're always repeated. That's the model for all of the text-to-text project, is repetition of words and a focus on a particular curriculum. In the last year, as I've seen misinterpretations of the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is claiming from an aspirational test that our kids are not who they should be, I think we've got some great kids. And I also think that what they lack is enough reading experience to be highly proficient. And giving them the text for first graders isn't what they need. That's where I've been working on. Heroes is a set of texts. I've found individuals who have accomplished incredible things of different ethnic groups, and none of them are singers, movie stars, or sports heroes. They're all people who, like the woman on this right-hand side here, if you can see that at the bottom, she's an attorney. We've got playwrights. We've got the first Latina who flew a fighter pilot plane for the U.S. And then here's the story labs that I was telling you about. I've just launched this one, Rogue Readers, just because I was reviewing interventions for high school kids, and I was just appalled at some of the decodable texts they were giving high school kids. So I've developed a tongue-in-cheek set of readers. It's my very bizarre sense of humor, and I don't know how there's no data on those. No data. On the topic reads, on this model, there's very strong data. that it helps to have this group of words present in text and you have enough exposure to it. Topic reads actually had an ESEA top tier. So this gives you some idea. Are there some questions about this, Jan? Oh,
No,
and
I
by the
think
way, any text that I now curate, because for presentations like the one today, I always make new texts. So we just put them here in this thing called text models. Sorry, Jan.
very good. No, I think I know there was a lot of hope that you would get around to talking about text projects, so this is fantastic.
Okay,
Nope.
I want to just talk a little bit in the very last period of time here about how I use AI to curate text. Um, and like I said, I've actually written a blog for you. I got it posted so you could take a look at it. And I've been looking at texts that are used maybe in AP classes, maybe not, but for adolescents. And this is an example, Things Fall Apart. Fabulous text, but there's so much that kids aren't going to know about. So I've written a blog to give you background on how I go about doing this. But this is the actual text set that I generated. Oh, but I forgot to show you the very first thing that I do. And somehow I missed that. I'm so sorry. The first thing I do is I actually ask AI. AI doesn't have to have the text. The first thing I ask AI is, what are concepts in this text that would be hard for American teenagers who haven't read a lot? And AI actually gave me these various topics. And then I keep asking, and these are actually pictures generated by AI. Okay, so it turns out this was just amazing to me that I don't know if you knew this. This is one of the things I share at dinner parties where then we don't really get asked back a lot. But I was amazed that in 1884, 1885, there was a meeting of Europeans in Berlin where they actually divided up Africa. And the UK this week, the Nigerian president has been visiting the UK and Canadian king and Charles. And what they did is they took three very different groups and made them into a country, told them they were a country. And I think that this kind of information is really important. So I query AI about, what does it mean? It tells me, what are other books that have been written about Africa? Well, Joseph Conrad's book has been written about Africa. And I mean, it gave such a different portrayal. And Things Fall Apart was the first one where an African was actually writing from an African standpoint. And I think that all these, I query AI and I'm sorry, I actually have a handout for this. And I thought I had it on here. And apparently I missed this part. So forgive me for that, but it is at Text Project with the blog. Okay, so you can, but I want to, this is really what I wanted to talk with you about. So there was a question about, wouldn't it be good to take these morphological families and make text out of them? Well, it works really well with the Anglo-Saxon, and I just love writing the ones about the Greek words because you can tell really funny little stories, about the time eaters. I mean, that's pretty cool. And it helps you start understanding how these words are made. I could see a whole little series with chrono, you know? But when it comes to writing text with morphological families that are in the main part of the general academic vocabulary, it's really hard to get a constructive storyline or informational text. There are a lot of what you don't want to do when you provide these texts, like I do at Text Project, is put in gratuitous new words. Like the word flustered, that's not a good word to have here. Or even a word like prism. Okay, so I'm just saying what I've seen is it's really hard to create interesting text, and I've been trying around morphological families that are in the general academic group. So let me show you what I'm working on now. So this is I start with a curriculum. So this is a new product, expanding on the word roots in the morphological families from Latin. And, I know that exposure influences automaticity. Words are typically members of morphological families, and that polysyllabic words challenge many students. So let me tell you what I did. I took, remember I was talking about at the beginning about the big data. I took the most frequent 1,500 words in written English, and I established with the scope database how many of those had 3 or more syllables. And in the 1,500, you know that about what? Like many, many more words in English have multiple syllables than monosyllabic words, but the first 1,000 or so are fairly monosyllabic. But I got 170, got 175 3+ syllable words. And then I used the new um, database from Florida State, the Development English Lexicon Project, and I picked the 25 most difficult words. And then I used the Zeno database to identify family members of target words. Hope that's making sense. Start out by identifying 3-syllable words with scope. Then I pick the 25 most difficult ones of those 175, and then I'm going to identify family members. So here's my database. So here's the difficulty, the logit from the Developmental English Lexicon Project. Here's from Zeno, the predicted appearances per million. Here are the additional predicted appearances per million of words within the target family. And what I want to know is how many family members are in that group of 2,500 morphological families. Remember I showed you the gold and yellow words? Those are the words that you really got to be automatic with. And this is what I found. So what I see here is that the word production has 10 morphological family members, and it actually is worth a whole lot, as is the word variety. So I asked AI if it could help me create a text about variety and production. And you'll get this on Monday or when we send out um, when Amy sends out the handout. But remember, I always start with I want a text for fourth graders who aren't um, great readers. I want them to be about a class putting on a variety show. And then I just had to do a lot of work on this because the morphological words that it produced could be very, very, very strange. So as you see, I worked hard to get repetition of words and eventually get a text that looks like this. Okay, so what I want to point out is that I start with a curriculum. So it isn't that I happen to think, I don't know this yet. I don't know if we know enough about morphological awareness, but I'm hypothesizing that the best place to start developing morphological awareness is with words that appear frequently. So I'm drawing on Seidenberg's work, and that also have a lot of family members. Okay, so what I'm saying is in the creation of these texts, for me, the curriculum is always the most important. So in the things that fall apart, I'm not showing you like, each iteration of the text as I went through it, but I'm saying the planning of it, the concepts that I want to teach are what are really critical. So this will be on TextProject, and what you see here is I got 11 instances of production, 9 of variety, and then I also created a set of sentences. And I want to show you what I'm trying to do. I've looked at so many workbook programs of morphological study and multisyllabic words, and they're always random words and random sentences. I see we for the kids who depend on schools, we don't have that much time with them. And what I wanted to do is always create a text that has some meaning to it. So this is a text that kind of progresses, basically summarizing the story that has just been written. So this is TextProject. Oh, everything on TextProject is free, right? I don't know if you realize that. I'm not selling anything. Um, everything is free. Uh, everything I've ever written is on here. I also do a fair amount of work on vocabulary. That's here. We're developing these teaching toolkits, but we've got about 1,000 texts now. And here's some of the references. Here's some additional materials to hear. And then finally, thank you for who you are and what you do, and for listening to me for an hour and 25 minutes. I mean, I think, Jan, if they haven't gotten a certificate, I could give them a special one with a special, little sticker on it because I really appreciate it.
Well, we do have a lovely certificate from Reed Washington that we will be sharing. And anything else, you're getting hearts floating across the screen all over the place, Freddie. I do have two more questions at this point, before we do the wrap up. Um, Wondering about your comments about assessment. So, an anonymous attendee is asking that they are being asked in their school to move away, as many schools are, away from the F&P assessment that puts kids into specific levels of text that are affiliated with the F&P program, and they're being asked to move away from that, looking for an alternative. Any thoughts on that? They've been suggested to the cubed, CUBED assessment has been suggested. And she acknowledges this is a little off topic, but do you have any information about that?
Well, I think we should ask Jan to answer that because she's more into the assessment domain. At Text Project, when I said that topic reads was a complete program, there
Yeah.
is a set of before and after oral reading fluency passages for each of the 6 levels of topic reads. For the beginning reads, I actually have something called the reading GPS, where you could actually go in and use some oral reading fluency. Is it going to do the placement? This is good, guys, that
Mhm.
we're moving away from the
Mhm.
F and P.
Yeah.
The the research foundation for the labeling of kids and labeling of books was idiosyncratic at best. This is something that I've written about. If you want to look in the research literature, I mean, we've actually looked to see Murray, who started the Reading League. We wrote a text in 2014. Um, we wrote a research paper about, the lack of any coherent linguistic foundation
Mhm.
for those texts. So this is all good. We've got a gap now, and I know that something needs to be there to fill it. Um, I wish I could, you know, Roar has some interesting things, but it doesn't have at this point a text level oral reading fluency piece.
Mm.
Um, Roar is free if a school buys into. I mean, they have to go as a school, and then their performances become part of a very huge database.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, guys.
There is. And Freddie, you had mentioned previously the core, that's one of the tools you use. And Amy, every time you say something, Amy, in within seconds, has put that link to that, including the picture source for pictures, your recent blog where you explain how to use AI, and a link in the chat to obtaining that core assessment. And for that question, I would say that's a very good place to start. That core multiple measures, there's
Yeah.
so much in there. And it's more skill oriented, which is the way that we should be going rather than leveling kids. Where are they in the development of their reading? Where are their strengths? Where are their skill weaknesses? And Julie just mentioned that CORE has oral reading fluency and Maze assessment and benchmarks. So that's just a wonderful, wonderful
Yeah,
resource.
and Jen, this is a community that you know a lot about, but Jerry Tyndall
Yep.
has passages,
Yeah.
you know, a cadence has passages, and I don't and Dibbles. And
Yep.
one of the things is that got a lot of questions about how some of these texts are created, especially
Hmm.
around decodability. And I think we haven't gotten to the really sweet spot yet. If Louisa's still on, maybe she can contribute to some of this question of assessments. I mean, I'm not selling anything here. We have that reading GPS. I don't think it's comprehensive. And this is something I really need to work on. Um, but I have to tell you, I love writing text. You know, I get
That's
kind of
wonderful.
like, yeah, you know, I have to tell you, Jen's going to talk a little bit about the assessment, but I have to tell you what my most recent project is. So at Plain Talk last week, somebody from the Bering Strait School District in Alaska, and I'm going up there in May, not to Bering Strait, but to Anchorage. But she asked me about text for Native Alaskan kids, indigenous North Americans from the North, because they're not only in Alaska, they're in my country, they're in Canada too. But I started looking at, stuff about what life is like now in that part of the world. And I started discovering that a really big assist in lots of different parts of life is duct tape. So I've started this whole series on what would have happened if Jack London's characters, like in To Build a Fire, had duct tape. So I'm writing a whole set of adventure stories.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I'm just telling
Okay.
you that I
We'll
get,
we'll look for that series soon. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Jack
So let's go back to
London
the
with
assessment
yeah.
question.
Okay. Uh well, I think we could go in a real deep dive, but I think a good place for someone to start who's early in that journey, starting with those core measures would be, and the other resources that you mentioned. Yeah, all of the companies, the commercially available oral reading fluency curriculum-based measurement companies have free assessments as part of their. One more question, though, came up in the Q&A, Freddie, that Nancy was asked to recommend books at a grade 2 to 3 level that would appeal to middle school, junior high, ESL students. And she's wondering if your book sets would do the trick.
That's exactly what they're written for is the topic reads actually came from a program for high school kids that the company that owned it decided to jettison it. And because at that point, about 7 years ago, they didn't think high school reading was a problem. And those texts are intended. I didn't really emphasize this today, but everything I write, as you could even see with those, study sheets, everything I write is around background knowledge. Because
Mm,
background knowledge, which is vocabulary,
yeah,
I mean, we really, 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 need to remember that that's what it's all about. It's teaching kids about concepts. That's why they come to school, that there's
right.
something to learn about.
Yeah.
And back on the assessment, I might also say that, F&P wasn't cheap.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, I mean,
For
looking at
sure.
some of these other more carefully calibrated is what I'm going to say. Carefully calibrated systems is what you want.
Yeah.
And people like Jan and Jerry Tyndall and that, they've been working hard on a carefully calibrated research-based system.
Wanting to give teachers support for sure. Rachel is saying so much of the research and processes that amazing researchers like you, Freddie, use is behind a paywall or not easily accessible to teachers. That you offer these resources along with your incredible knowledge for free is so appreciated by teachers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of thank yous all through this. I want to respect people's time, so I'm going to wrap up then and give our last couple of comments here and announcements. Um, Sharing my screen now. Um, so yes, was this not the most amazing webinar? A lot to process, but you will be getting the recording and the resources as well. We hope that you come back for our next event. You can put this on your calendar as a save the date if you'd like. We're going to present a webinar on the science of reading fluency and connecting that to comprehension. That's May 16th, a Saturday, May 16th. That will be brought to you by yours truly. I'm looking forward to presenting that webinar to you on May 16th. And
Excuse
we
me,
want,
Jan, you've got to
yeah.
put your beautiful slide of our next webinar up. We're
Oh, it's
seeing your
not showing.
Google.
Okay.
Yeah,
I want to share that.
a beautiful slide.
Yes, it is. So let's get that on there. Are you seeing Freddie now, the Freddie slide?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I can try once again.
There. Yep.
All right. Thanks to Freddie for her wonderful webinar. Our next event, May 16th, presented by me at the same time. Our webinars are always at the same time. These are Pacific times. Obviously, you have figured that out. Thank you, Julie, for letting me know. So thank you, Freddie. Thanks to all of you who attended. We do hope to see you at our next event. And together, we can prevent the unnecessary pain of reading failure. Thank you again. I hope you enjoy the recording. Feel free to share it widely. And thank you, Freddie,
Thank you
for
for the
everything.
opportunity, guys, very much.